what exactly is the constellation of Jewish music and Yiddish music, and what is the overlap between them? For example, cantorial music, right? That would be something.
Didn't you teach like a 20 session course on this one topic?
Are you talking about in this opera? Or
Oh,
just
in this opera or in Cohen's output more generally, especially because as he's someone who wrote in so many different genres and yet embodied this notion of Yiddishkeit, citizen of Yiddish land, sort of the rootless cosmopolitan. So I just give you an example of something outside the overlap, as I mentioned, like synagogue music, which is specifically in the a religious observance realm. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with
Well,
Yiddish culture broadly.
well, the short answer would be, for me, I would argue that all Yiddish music is Jewish music, right? You could say that. You could make that point. So it's, it's difficult. Like that would depend very much on your definition of Jewish music. So we would need to ask, what is your definition of Jewish music? Is it in the sense of, Kurt Sachs, like, in 1956 saying, Jewish music is music made by Jews for Jewish purposes. It's like, which definition of Jewish music do you apply?
It is. I'm totally taken aback by the question because I wasn't sure I understood it. And I'm just the little orchestrator now. And with all these like brainiacs. But this question gets asked a lot, and it's been being asked since the 19th century. And I love to ask people who ask it, why is it important to you? Because the asker of the question always seems to have, is this working? Has an agenda, and I don't mean that like you have an agenda, but there is. I mean, there is. You're asking it because it's somehow important to you, and that influences the answer. And I don't mean to be vague about it, but it really does, because the desire to want to frame it in that way already limits our answer to that realm. So. We can get into the music itself and go kind of almost quantify what we think sounds Jewish. And I have this trouble because we do a lot in the realm of klezmer music. And I'll just give you an example. Around the turn of the century, there was a genre in the wedding, the Kalabesetzens, where you'd have to play to the bride to make her cry. And there'd be a badchen, the master of ceremony. I'm sure everybody probably knows this. But they would, the musicians would play interludes in between. And I think that those interludes used to not be what they became, which was the Romanian doina, a very specific type of Romanian doina, a shepherd's song. And that transition where the old way of playing those transitions evolved into a new way at the time where Romanian music was very popular. It was like, the New York of the 19th century, and cosmopolitan and everything else. But that doina became a staple of the wedding. So I'm teaching at Klez Camp, this is about 2 decades ago, and a very well-known marimba player who lives, probably, they know who I'm talking about, has sired many people, many children, many wives. He stood up in the class, and he was in my doina class. I was teaching him how to do doinas. And he said, the doina is a Jewish thing. And I said, yeah, no, the word itself is Romanian or Dacian, and the form kind of comes from the Romanians. He goes, no, it's Jewish. And I said, no, it's Romanian, and it also Jewish. And so his perspective was that it was so powerful in the Jewish that he knew that he didn't realize that it was an amalgam of other things. And that happens so much in the music, that demarcation between what is Jewish, what is Yiddish, it's not only vague, it changes hands. And to be able to say, well, this really, a lot of the elements came from this other realm, geographically, culturally, everything, but we imbibed it and they lost it and we took it over, now it's ours. And I'm sure all of you know this type of cultural formation. It is happening all the time, and That's how I see it. So that's why I can't answer that question. I don't know how to quantify that.
I mean, I asked him not out of personal reasons, though. I probably have some personal investment, but more because it was a question that occupied so many people.
Yes.
And drove so much institution building and institution building.
Yeah.
Aesthetic agendas, very formalized agendas. That,
Yes.
That people, so many people felt compelled to create instead of just writing music.
I didn't mean to accuse you, but I did. I know I did. But,
Defend myself.
but yeah, but there is that, like, why is this important at all? Anyway, I took a long time to answer that.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we spoke about this a little earlier. You know, it's this whole kind of weird thing, the way the arts have unfolded, say, in university, right? So, you know, when you combine music and movement, it's called dance, and it's another place, and you combine music and theater, and it's called opera, and it's in the music department. But, you know, the people who created this were people of the theater, and they imagined this as a theatrical performance. I'm not even clear from talking to all of you whether it was staged originally. I mean, the picture suggests it was staged, and whether thinking about, even as you did more of an oratorio presentation, thinking about its theatricality, embeddedness, informed any of the way you thought about producing it.
Well, this was not so much with respect to producing it, putting it on stage, but just filling in the blanks, the lacunae in the manuscript. One of the main problem that I had when I first looked at it was nothing actually happens in this thing. Everything has either happened already and is being reported, or is being warned against, or is being envisioned.
Like one long narrative of something we've already seen and already know.
Yeah, there's no action, right? Nobody, they just kind of yell at each other, which I thought was, you know.
Right, but that's the essential theater. It's the antagonism between two each equally matched protagonists. One has God on the side, the other has state power, and you know there's a tension because neither can prevail.
Yeah, but in this case there was no staging that was evident from the manuscript. And all of the events, I may have mentioned this yesterday in the talk back, by the time you hit the lacuna in the manuscript, everything that's in the Bible's already happened, except for the death of the child. And you've got 15, 16, 20 pages that still need to be filled up. And I'm trying to figure out what might have been there. You know, what might Rodism and Cohn actually have had in there? And all I can see is that it would have been some kind of fantasia sort of thing where, you know, we move away from delimited activity to some kind of fugue state, and I don't mean that in the musical sense. You know, some sort of just like something more overtly psychological, I guess. But this also it plays into, I think, a little bit of what Josh was just talking about in response to that question, is there's an aspect of intentionality behind all of this. You know, what are you using this music for? I think probably what to me, and I come from a very religious background, to me the quintessential Jewish song it's in Hungarian. It's called Szolak a Koshmar. Means the rooster crows. The rooster is crowing at dawn, I believe. I don't speak Hungarian myself. Yet, in the world I came from, everybody, my family's from Poland, they all knew this song. They couldn't pronounce it properly, but they all knew it. And there's a story to the song, which is that a Hasidic leader, was out one day, you know, strolling around the 18th century, and he hears a shepherd boy playing this song. And he takes the song, like he gets the shepherd boy to give him the song, that then becomes, and with new words, it becomes this so quintessentially Jewish that it is, you know, the defining song, I think, of the Hasidic world. It was recently re-recorded, it was Musikash did it, as a piece of Hungarian folklore, but they did the Jewish version of it. So it's both Jewish and Hungarian at the same time. And I think a lot of that comes into this. I know as a kid, I could never understand why sometimes I get on an elevator around Christmas time and I would hear this Hanukkah song coming in over the music. It's like, where did the music people come to Hanukkah? I learned this, I grew up in Alberta in Western Canada, where there's not a large ultra-Orthodox community. So I went to Ivrit day schools in Calgary. And I knew this song, it's Hail the Conquering Hero. But I only knew it in Hebrew. Right? It was Havanarima Nesbavuka Yachad Bonashira Shira Chanukah. And I'm like, why are these going playing it in the elevator? To me, this is a Jewish song. Until I saw the movie, there's an old movie, an old Preston Sturges movie called Hail the Conquering Hero. I had no idea. I was not familiar with the handle. Yeah. So, you know, I think really it's what use do you want to put it to? Something like that. Yeah. Somebody stop me.
The question of staging this piece is really a very interesting one for all the reasons that everybody has mentioned. I guess we haven't tried. My sense is, I mean, the music itself is quite dramatic. It's quite, it's not static. You know, this is not like Sati Sokrat or something, which is sort of a melodrama, you know, kind of meditation. But yet, I think it would be very challenging to do it successfully. It would take a very, you know, a big understanding, a kind of very creative directorial hand to not over sentimentalize or, you know, chew the scenery so much, sort of to keep that psychological element. And that's why I thought that in both Toronto and here, the visuals were so wonderful for this, because they were a counterpoint. They were not trying to be literal, but unlike so much visual accompaniment to, you know, not trusting the audience and having annoying things going on that distract you and all, I really thought that in this case, it enhanced the kind of understanding of the audience of moving the story forward, and also it had this kind of color, this and almost whimsicality, which strangely I thought kind of evened out the melodrama emotionally.
Can I just say something to that? Because there is a moment that is very stageable, which is what you showed in the picture, right? When you have them, where the whole thing is humanized. It's a relationship between these two people that is actually also involved in this story, not just the sin, not just the murder, and not just the affront to God, but also a relationship between two people. And that is staged. I think it needs to be in some sense staged. It was hinted at last night, but yeah. That's an operatic scene. He falls asleep. I mean, something happens, right?
We struggled a little bit with the Cinderella struggle, but we talked a lot with the four soloists about to what extent should we really, you know, go to each other and have these relationships. And we had very little time to really work it out. This wasn't like a production where you have weeks of, you know, table reads and this and that. But just as the orchestra rehearsals went along, the three of them that we had with the singers, they really began to kind of inhabit that and get comfortable with whatever those relationships could have been. And as we were talking before, in the climactic scene of your music and your text, where the four of them really are in their own worlds, in a highly emotional state, it's hard. It's hard to do that. I don't know how you think that came off.
Well, okay, it came off great. I mean, this was the best performance that we've had, and I hope that's not on tape. But we all thought of it dramatically and visually too. For instance, that when Batsheva is singing her lullaby, she's in a different room altogether. She's in a different chamber, and Shaliach has to come in shouting, David, David, your child dead, and there's all those things going on. But I kind of, in my mind, before I began orchestrating it, I was, I don't know why, but thinking of Bluebeard's Castle, which is only two principals and a couple of doors on the stage, and it's all psychological. You don't even know, is this in her mind? Is this in her mind, or is it? But yet, I have only seen a couple of scenes of that. How it was realized, but it's been done. And I'm just thinking, because this is so psychological and it's so much about guilt, there must be many ways to portray that visually, guilt. And you can go off into lots of, we all have guilt, like different ways of that we have guilt. But so I see the whole thing as very possibly visualized. Yeah.
All right, we have one more.
This is maybe a weird question, but this sort of lack of staging, the soloist up front, biblical subject put me in kind of a mindset of an oratorio more than an opera. And then musically, I mentioned this to you, I was expecting sort of 19th century music or early 20th century music, but I was hearing kind of nods to Handel or even Mendelssohn, with especially at the beginning, there was a lot of like Christian cadences, and I think of that as kind of high Christian music. And I was wondering, what do you think Cohn was doing in sort of drawing from that repertoire as well?
I would like to answer that because we were talking about counterpoint. Cohn's counterpoint, and I wrote an article on this that hasn't been published, but very critical about some of the problems that I saw in the score. One of which was that Cohn, for instance, has this part that he calls a fuguetta, a little fugue. And the theme of that, bum, 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 ba-da-da-dum, it spans, how much is that, about a 12th? You would never do that in a fugue. This is why Bach's fugues have such small ambitus, an ambitus, that because to be able to have all four, if you're the four-part fugue, let's say, instruments do it, the range is already there. As soon as you go out of, into a large range, you cross with the counter subject. And this is why when Cohn starts this fuguetta, he doesn't finish it. It's like not even the whole exposition. There are three instruments, and then he's like, I've had enough. Let's go homophonic again. And not only that, it's not just the range of the theme, but it's also that the flute, and seriously, he put it in the score, the flute enters as the second voice, which is kind of covered, and I'm going like, come on, Cohn, get it together. It's the oboe, but so I respected those, and these things happen a lot, like where he kind of starts something and then he doesn't finish it. He's just like, I'm through with that. And so how to deal with that is there's very fragmented things that happen in the score. But one thing that I will say about that, so anyway, you go to the Handelian aspects of whole thing. It's very Bach-like. He seemed to really like counterpoint, and after the child dies, there's this lovely thing where it's very contrapuntal, and he does a really good job of it too. And there's also a section where he has this Wagnerian modulation. It's like, oh my God, the guy's doing what Wagner was fond of doing modulations like by major thirds and by tritones and stuff. And Cohn does this at one point, and I said, oh my God, the guy's really got it together for those 6 bars. and then it's gone, and it's like, and he, so it really was, but it's really a mishmash in a good way. He understands that he's wants it to be Baroque, and he wants it to be high romantic, and he wants it to be Wagnerian, and he wants it to be Yiddish theater and modal and klezmer, and the Phrygian cadence is a staple of klezmer music anyway. So it's not just, but the way that they did the Phrygian cadences. Remember, we have the Landini cadence, if you can remember back there. That's also a Phrygian cadence, but it doesn't work the same way. And then we have the klezmer cadence, which has the root moving up one step. And then we have the Yiddish theater cadence of this form, where you have the step up. Let's say you're going from C minor to D, but you have an A in the bass, so you have a minor 7 flat 5. That's and he uses that too. So he is accessing these different sides very consciously. It's clear that he knows exactly what he's doing, except for the counterpoint part. But yeah, so, I think he's just enjoying the kind of, the Baroque, giving a nod to Baroque opera, which is where we're starting from, this whole thing with Monteverdi and all that. Yeah.
It's kind of a polyglot.
Very much. And that it dovetails into the question of how much is Jewish. I mean, that's the quantification. That's not Jewish, where he does the Handelian thing. There's nothing Jewish about it.
All right, this is my metaphorical hook. I think we have to take a break so that we can hear Daniela's paper. Let us reconvene. Let's see, it is currently 11:18, so at 11:28.